The planets have aligned, and once again, the prophecy has come true. That's right, folks. It's time for another episode of the Roundtable Rethink podcast with me, your part-time host, Andy the Asshole. Woo! Joined every week, but this week from the Cotswolds by twin brother and spare parts bin, Uncle Paddy.
Come on now.
And he's back from the fair city of Ireland after a week celebrating Paddy's Day in Dublin. It's the sage himself, Stevie Tel Aviv.
Good to be back. Good to be back.
This week, we'll be discussing Global GPT. What is it and why it could be the perfect product for you? We'll also be doing Module 2 in our 10-week breakdown of the entrepreneurial process, which is understanding your market. And finally, Stevie Tel Aviv will lead us on a freewheeling chat about values, Tesla, and any damn thing we please. Boys, it's great to have the three musketeers back together. How the hell are you?
It's been a great week. Dublin, St. Paddy's Day, fabulous to see. Travelling with some American colleagues, friends. Great time. Great to see Dublin, Belfast, Scotland, and see it through other people's eyes and get to speak to some young Americans and understand some of the things that they're thinking about just now. So fabulous week. What about you, Padster? Where are you at the moment? What are you doing?
Well, we're down in the Cotswolds this week, and we've been here since Friday, spending a bit of time down here with friends. It is absolutely stunning, one of the most beautiful parts of the country, and we've had great fun, and we've done awesome things like go and see the glorious and magnificent Blenheim Palace, all the way through to picking up 4 crates of Hawkstone Premium from Diddley Squat Farm.
How was Diddley Squat Farm and was Big Jezza there?
It was really weird because it's not what you see on TV. The TV show creates an impression that the farm shop is there and right next to it is Jeremy's house. And it's not. The farm shop is literally there in isolation with nothing else there at all. So there's a very tiny farm shop. Out the back of the farm shop, they've got a couple of little stalls selling local products from local vendors. And then they have a tiny bar with a couple of pumps on it selling Hawkstone. And 150 people queuing up to buy effectively crates of Hawkstone. And that's basically what it's become. Certainly my experience, it was just show up, get your picture taken at the Diddley Squat sign, park in the overflow car parking because there's already 100 cars in the main car park. And then honestly, they must have went through 10 pallets of Hawkstone in the 20 minutes that I was in the queue.
And Clarkson's always played in poverty about that bloody farm, but it sounds like he's printing money down there.
I'm telling you something, man. He might become a billionaire just on the booze sales. It was unbelievable the amount of stuff he was shifting.
What for Conor
but you know
McGregor?
I don't do queues, right?
Yeah.
So I get there. I'm at the back of the queue. There's 100 people in the queue. It has not moved an inch in 10 minutes.
Wow.
So I was like, fuck this. I just walked straight to the front of the queue, had a whole bunch of people abusing me, lifted 4 crates of Hawkstone, stuck them on the counter while people were calling me obscenities, gave the guy my card and walked back and being abused all the way back to the car.
I do love the fact, though, that it almost perfectly addresses the next part of today, which is knowing your market.
Exactly.
Who would have worked
Exactly.
out that beer was the secret?
Well, just to finish that,
So it's been a great trip.
Brilliant. I'm glad to hear it. I'm looking forward to getting you back on Wednesday morning. So just to finish that chat, I was down for a couple of days in the Lake District at the weekend. Had a lovely time with Lee and friends. Booked a lovely wee kind of, it's like Bilbo Baggins' cottage down in Lake Windermere in the Lake District. And we had a nice time. We were in Bowness, we were in Ambleside, and we were out on the boat. And so very chill, very relaxed, and but glad to be back here. It's been a while since we've had 3 in this room. Hopefully we can get back to that next week, but I'm glad to be joined by my amigo Stevie Tel Aviv in person.
And I have to say, for everyone listening tonight, they're left with this vision of you of being 3'6" with large hairy feet.
Yeah, I mean they're only about 1 foot away.
Departure from reality.
Okay, guys, let's get stuck into this docket because it's been another exhilarating week in AI, and one of the products that I wanted to shine a wee bit of light on is one that I've adopted myself, and I'll tell you the precursor to this chat. I'll tee it up like this. I am assailed almost by the day for people looking for advice on AI and do you want to get a coffee and picking my brains and stuff, 100%. And that's fine. There's a wee bit of that going on just now, and that's totally fine. But one of the questions I get most frequently is, I'm doing this type of work, what model should I sign up for? Because I've only got so much money, right? Unlike fucking Paddy and me, you know, not everybody can sign up to hundreds of pounds a month worth of AI products. So I've found this unbelievable aggregator product called Global GPT. And for me, this is a complete game changer and is now where I carry out most of my tasks. So what's Global GPT? So it basically is an aggregator that brings all the frontier AI models together in one place. So you've got the latest version of ChatGPT, you've got 4.5, you've got Claude 3.7 Sonnet, you've got Perplexity, Gemini, DeepSeek, plus you've got a bunch of creative tools like Midjourney for images, for image generation, and Runway for video. But here's the magic. Instead of having, if you've got, let's say for example, you've got a complex task, right? You need to get a model to do research, then you need to create a working document, and then from that create a one-page website, and then you need an image to support that one-page website and a video to support it. You would be basically logging into 4 or 5 different models to get that task accomplished. You know, copying and pasting stuff, typing in passwords. You've had 5 different tabs open in your desk. You can now do all of that inside of Global GPT. So that's the thing that's really incredible about it, is it lets you do everything in the one workflow. So you can hand tasks between models like a relay runner. So you're just passing off the baton to the next one. So you get Perplexity to go off and do the research in something. And then you can just hit the @ symbol and type in Claude. And Claude just hands the baton off of Perplexity, and you go, right, Claude, now that you've got all that information, go and create me a website for that. And Claude goes and creates you the website for that. And then you @ in Midjourney and you say, thanks, Claude. Midjourney, I'll take it from here. I need an image for this website. Create me this image in this cyberpunk style. And so you can basically leverage all of these AI tools in the one platform. And I'll tell you what, it's completely revolutionized my workflow. And here's the best bit about it. It's $25 a month for the Pro subscription, which has got fantastic use limits on it. So, for example, if you were paying for ChatGPT Pro, you'd be paying 20, 25 quid a month. Mm-hmm. And then you'll burn out the free stuff, you know, for Perplexity and the other models really, really quickly. So to get that type of user credits for a one payment of £25 a month and get access to all those models and all those creativity tools, I think it's absolutely brilliant. I gave you a wee look at it earlier, Paddy. What did you think?
I thought it was great, and I'm definitely looking for opportunities to consolidate all the different tools that I'm paying for, because it is getting kind of stupid now. And so I agree with everything. I think it's probably the right thing for most people's usage. There's only one thing that I've seen so far that I think might be a wee bit of a weakness or a flaw in it, and that would be that Grok 3 is not currently available as a tool. Now, I think the passage of time will take care of that. The other thing that I'm seeing here is that the different capabilities behind the models, like deep research and think, the type of tools that you have access to through Gemini and through Grok. So it's where you can put your prompt in and then tell the model, hey, listen, just think about this for a bit longer. Yeah. These are buttons that you can press before you go and execute the prompt. I don't see any ability to do that when you're using that model in Global GPT. Now, I don't think for most people that's a deal breaker. Yeah. That's why I still believe that for most people this is probably a good tool. And yeah, if you can consolidate 6 subscriptions into one, then what's not to love about that, eh?
So 2 questions then. One, what we're seeing is more and more for less and less. Is there a financial model for these chat GPTs that work, or are we basically on a line to zero and it becomes a use case? And there's this old story: if they're charging nothing for it, are you the product? Where's the money out of all of this?
Well, that's very interesting that you mentioned that, because we haven't spoke before the show started, but Paddy and I had a conversation earlier today, and I know you've not done the research on it, Paddy, but anecdotally, there was information coming out about potentially the CCP employing this strategy of flooding the market with cheap frontier models to basically break the bank.
Cheap or more like free, I think.
Aye.
See, I think the problem right now is everybody assumed that the economic value here would be captured by the model makers, and that what had been a derogatory term, a wrapper.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody built a wrapper around about ChatGPT. So they built some capability on ChatGPT. Up until very recently, that had been considered commodity stuff that was going to get wiped out as the models got better.
Yeah.
I think the thinking on this is starting to flip. And where the thinking's headed is that actually there's not going to be any money in the frontier models, because they're going to be free or open source, and all the economic value will get captured by the app makers, by the guys who build the capabilities on top of the models. Now, again, I don't want to put this out there as fact. I'm only telling you that as recently as this afternoon, I've read 2 or 3 posts from reputable sources that I would normally trust for information to say that there is a strategy in the East where if the American economy is entirely predicated on the valuation of a dozen AI companies, then by destroying the economic value of the AI companies, by flooding the market with cheap, awesome, free models for people to utilize that are open source, then you could pretty much put a dent, and maybe not destroy, but put a meaningful dent in the US economy. And it's a very, very interesting point of view.
Yeah, and I mean...
And I'm not presenting that as fact, by the way. Everybody should be clear about that. But I've seen it in more than one place, and it's coming from sources that I would have historically found to be quite reliable.
But historically, if you look at it, I mean, the nearest thing to this that I can think of would have been the web. The web of itself didn't make money. It was the people that built the stuff on top of the web that made the money.
Exactly.
And is ultimately what we're doing is building web 3 or 4 or 5.0. LLMs will just be the new thing that everything sits upon. But it does bring into question some of the valuations of companies and stocks at the moment.
And you are seeing anecdotally a wee bit of this play out. So you had DeepSeek, which was the original challenger brand that came out of nowhere. But the latest one, Paddy, and this might be a good lead in for you, is because you've actually just got access yesterday or today to Manus, which we covered on the show last week.
Yeah. And by the way, I suspect I might be one of the first people to ever get access to Manus in the UK, because I've yet to be able to find
the power of the
UK
podcast
review. Well, I didn't say that, Stephen, but if you want to say that, that's fine. So I've yet to be able to find a UK-based review on Manus for somebody who's actually got a login. I've seen a lot of US-based stuff, but not a UK. So I was sitting in the pub last night enjoying another pint of Hawkstone Premium. And therein came the email from Manus: you're in. Here's your authorization code. Because don't forget, Manus is invite only as things stand today.
And you immediately turned around to Emma and said, I've got a sore tummy, I need to go back to the hotel.
And I must take my pint of Hawkstone with me.
No, a million miles for the truth, actually. She saw me go excited and animated at the bar. She's like, what's up? And I was like, Manus AI, I've got a login. She was like, oh my God.
Shut the fuck up.
So anyway, I did get an opportunity this afternoon. As my wife went to Bicester Village shopping, I found a Pret-a-Manger, blasted the laptop open and logged in and started playing with Manus.
And what was your initial kind of thoughts as you were
Initial take is, I now see what's different about this to the other main AI products. So the thing that's different to Manus is it's basically a virtual machine. It's an entire compute environment that you're interacting with. So if you give Manus a command like go and scrape this website, get all the information, fill it out in a table, then export it as a PDF, you actually see the console. For anybody who's ever like opened up the terminal in Windows or opened up the terminal on a Mac. That type of interface, you see that loading on the right-hand side. And so if it needs to go and install some Python library to take an action that you've just gave it, you see it installing the library, and it keeps you updated. And the talk track that it sends back is actually really informative and comes back at the right cadence. So it'll say, installing PyTorch, doing this, installing web scraping component, then it'll start and go and scrape the website. So this is very much in that agentic AI camp that we've talked about in the past. That this is not about retrieval. This is about sending AI to do things. So some really cool stuff I'd seen in their own kind of showcase, which is only available once you get in. They've got different topics, right? They've got like productivity
and
work from home, data analysis, research. So under the productivity section, there was one where somebody uploaded a zip file that had 50 resumes, CVs in it, with command to work through the CVs. And I think the example they gave it was for a reinforcement learning engineer. So it's worked through these 50 CVs for a reinforcement learning engineers. Here's the criteria we're looking for. Stack rank the candidates in the order of which we should reach out to them. And then
discard
qualify out the guys that don't make the cut, and then put them in a different table. And so you see, it actually plays back that kind of live scenario to you. So you can almost like replay that event.
Yeah.
And you can see all its workings and how it got to that point. And of course, in the end, it spits you out a list of people and telephone numbers and email addresses to contact, builds you another list of people to discard for the process. Now, only recently, I know what it's like to have to sit and go through 50 fucking CVs and run that process in a manual way. And so I could really connect to that example. So I could totally see the value of that, for me at least.
So just as we finish up the chat on Manus, one of the things that I don't think is very well understood is just talk about the computer component. Like, it's not just a browser doing things and filling in form data. Talk about its ability to basically access a computer and download plugins and all that type of stuff.
I think I've covered it a bit. I mean, it's fundamentally got access to all the packages you would need to install on a computer to perform a task. And it will intelligently grab them, install them, and run them based on the series of tasks that you've provided. So you're not interacting with just a chat window. There's a whole interface over on the right-hand side where you're effectively interacting with your computer. It's not a Windows box, right?
No.
It doesn't have that type of interface, but it's very clear that you're interacting with an entire computer environment that can draw on resources that it needs, as any computer environment could, to solve problems based on the prompt that you've just gave it.
And that's
what's hugely differentiating about it.
Yeah, the one thing I just wanted to finish on is considering how capable it is and all the things that it can do, and the fact that it's so unbelievably compute heavy. It's unthinkable that at this point it's still free. There's no usage.
There's no way to pay for this.
No.
There's no way to pay for this. There's no pricing screen. There's no way to go and put a credit card in. Everything I can see so far is open source and free. Like you say, I'm kind of scratching my head in the background saying, who's bankrolling this? How does this work financially? Who's writing the checks for the compute and the infrastructure? How do they get money back? Answers at the moment, I have none.
And that brings me back to my original question, which again, you look at the major players in the internet markets just now, and you think, how did they make their money? Well, they made their money by getting market share, traffic, and then directing traffic in return for profit, whether it was Apple under its closed ecosystem or whether it's Google under searches. Do we end up seeing AIs that have preferences when it comes to collecting first recommendations on, is that the way the model's going to go, based on some form of manipulation, pushing people in certain directions?
There'll be different business models at play. Some of them might take the ads model, some of them might just go in subscription, some of them might have, promoted content or something like that. I think we're going to see a number of business models play out, because it's certainly not proven yet that anybody can generate enough income at the moment. So there's a lot of stock put in the future. There's nobody been able to generate enough income currently to justify the rate of innovation and the rate of compute and the rate of capability that's available. So it'll be interesting to see how these kind of models play out over the arc of time.
So just before we move on from Manus, right, there's one last example that would be very relevant for us. So there's an example here of podcast editing. So you could upload an hour-long podcast episode, and you could ask it to listen to the episode and find 3 or 4 really good quality, compelling 2-minute reels, identify them, cut them out, and create new audio files with their reels. Because if we weren't useless and we actually marketed the podcast properly, we would probably, and we could be bothered doing something like that, then we would chop the podcast up into chunks, right? And then we'd go out to all the different platforms and put little snippets everywhere. But of course, none of us can be bothered doing that. Well, this can do it, and it can do it on autopilot. Another great example of being able to do things rather than just retrieve information.
I think it's a great point. I mean, I know we all love listening to certain podcasters. Prof G is one that we all talk about.
Yeah.
And I was listening to him the other day, and he was actually talking about how many people support his show, how many people he needs by way of research. And for those listening, there's 3 of us. And we do it in one take, and we basically have minimal backup, but actually having the ability, and that's a perfect use case. So Paddy, our use case for next week is...
So once we get this podcast uploaded, this might be the first one that instead of just staring at our grotesque faces and the cover art that we launch for every new episode that drops, we might turn it into a wee video with some nice wee kind of hot takes from the podcast. So watch this space on LinkedIn this week. Okay, I think that's enough AI. We are 21 minutes in already. Time flies when you're talking shite about AI. Okay, last week we started the breakdown of the entrepreneurial journey with a chat about mindset and validating your idea. And today we are moving on to understanding your market. So we'll have some anecdotes about our own personal stories here, and what we did to evaluate and understand our own markets and why we chose the segments of the markets that we did. But Paddy, just kind of more broadly, do you want to lead us into this part of the conversation?
Yeah, for sure. And I actually think budding entrepreneurs listen to this are probably desperate to get to, like, how do you grow sales and marketing, and how do you scale a business, and how do you sell a company? But it is important to go through this thing meticulously, methodically, step by step, right? To get to all that subject matter right now would be to bypass way too many important things. I think this is all tough, hard, difficult stuff to do. I think budding entrepreneurs would rather kind of bypass some of these steps. Last week we talked about mindset, we talked about characteristics, we talked about disqualifying characteristics, things that would almost be a disqualifier for getting into entrepreneurship. But they're important, right? There's a reason we start at mindset and characteristics. So the next step on the ladder is we've identified an idea. We've identified that we've got the right mindset, and we made up of the right characteristics to go and have a run at this. And we've validated the idea. We've done some baseline validation of the idea with our close network and our friends and our family. So the logical next step is to go and understand if there is a market for this, right? And so we will break this subject down into 3 key points. So the first point will be the basics of market research. So what online tools and strategies are available, to do basic market research. The second point will be, how do you actually go and define who that target customer is? Okay, because everybody is not your customer. And then finally, how do you go and really check out competitors and industry trends? So that's how we're going to break up the 3 topics.
Yeah, and the precursor to this is, if you don't know who your customer is, you're essentially shouting into the void, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did you know that 42% of startups fail because they create products that there's no market for? And by the way, I think this is linked to a conversation we had last week about pain. I think cases could be made for all sorts of things where, well, there's a problem here and it needs a solution. It only means something if there's a significant amount of pain, enough pain,
to drive the action.
You can implicate that pain, that you can then drive the action to somebody who's in your target market who would pull out a credit card and swipe it, right, for that type of thing. So how do you define your target customer with laser precision and how do you analyze your competition in ways that actually give you an advantage? So the basics of market research. So everybody's blessed to have such fantastic tooling available to them today, right? Think about how this worked when Stephen, back 30 years ago when Stephen was 56.
57.
Yes.
How would this have worked, Stephen, 25 years ago, right? How would you have done market research? Well, geez, Louise, you had tools like the Yellow Pages and the Thomson's Local, and you had directories and you had networks, but we didn't have AI. Didn't have the internet and Google and all these different services. So we're very blessed to have such fantastic tooling, and certainly to do the market research part of this, there's never been a better time to do it. It's never been cheaper, easier, and faster to do that market research. So the first tool on the list here that I'm going to advocate for would be Google Trends. So Google Trends is a free tool under trends.google.com that Google makes available to everybody, where you can literally type in your thing and Google will show you how demand for that thing ebbs and flows over the year.
Yeah.
Okay, what does the search traffic and the search volume look like for that thing? Now, that's a great place to start because it kind of identifies your idea as being something that's got consistent demand, or it might be an idea that's actually got seasonal demand, and you need to really figure that into your planning. So just as an example, I put in golf lessons, right? So let's say you're a budding golf pro and you want to start a golf lessons business, and you go to Google Trends and you go, right, what is the demand for golf lessons? So unsurprisingly, and I'm actually just bringing it up here now, golf lessons are seasonal. So they actually peak in terms of Google traffic for that type of thing. They peak on or around the third week in July.
Because most people like me are fair weather golfers.
Exactly.
And one thing I'm going to come in on at this point, and I think it's a good story, because when you're looking at like Google Trends, you're looking at words. And the biggest problem, I think, and it's a problem I came across when we tried to launch the LegalBot thing, is that you have to think about it, not what you think about as your product, but what the public think about. And a very quick story was I was talking to our colleague and he asked me what such and such a legal term was. And I went, oh yeah, that's a gift of a thing. All right, let's look for gifts of things. What's that bit? That's a gift of money. All right, gift of money. He said, what's that bit? I went, that's the residue. And he said to me, what's the residue? I went, it's the residue. He says, what does that mean? I went, it's the residue. And I couldn't think of a simpler word. And we started to get quite heated over it. I went, it's the bit that's left over. And when you're searching for things, the problem sometimes when you're technical or when you are very caught up in your own processes, you're thinking about the word in the way that you think it's meant, but you have to get your head into the way that the public are searching for things. The most expensive word, I think, in the world was, I think, roulette misspelt. Because that's the way that people were searching for roulette, not the actual spelling of it.
Right, okay, that's it. I mean, I think the tool set is evolved enough now where if you put in a suggested term, it'll actually spit out all the derivatives of that, of what's actually being searched. But I mean, I get the point. Yeah.
I'm looking at it right now. It comes up with related terms.
Yeah.
So you put in your main term and it'll list out all the related kind of adjacent terms to that term. How do other people search for the same thing? And so it brings back a ton of great information. So it turns out that, and by the way, it will nail this right down to the week for you. So it turns out that for golf lessons, peak internet traffic on Google for that search term happens between the 21st and the 27th of July every year. And then you go into a very slow, deep, dark winter, which there's two troughs here. There's one between the 8th and the 14th of December, and another trough between the 6th and the 22nd of Feb. And then you start to come out of that trough and get back to a positive trend again. So that's very, very cool market information to have. Now, armed with that information, there's another tool that's called Answer the Public. Ever heard of that one before?
Yes, I have.
Right. So Answer the Public is where is a service, is a paid for service, but it's nobody's going to have to sell any vital organs to bankroll this.
It's for understanding the real questions that your audience has. Is that right?
Exactly what it is, Andy. So if you then go to answer the public and you type golf lessons into that, it will actually tell you the questions that people are asking online. By the way, across all the different platforms, not just Google, it covers Amazon, TikTok, Instagram, all the Facebook platforms. So across all those platforms, it will bring you back questions that people are asking about that subject. And the great thing about questions, a lot of times they identify pain.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to know in the questions, can you really see any pain? So one of the really interesting things when you put that term into answer the public is you get things back like, are golf lessons VATable? Are golf lessons tax deductible? And so there's a whole line of questioning with meaningful search volume associated with it. Obviously, from a business community of golfers who are trying to expense golf trips, golf lessons, golf instruction back to the company. Now, if I'm in the golf lesson business, that's gold.
Yeah, because you can start building sales messaging and talk track run about those pain points.
Hell yeah. And if none of my competitors are actually dealing with that need, that pain point in their messaging and their communication, then that's a great advantage that I've got that nobody else does. So I only use that as an example to show how these tools can be used and some of the insights that you can get from them.
And there's free
and the golf lesson idea came from a conversation I had with a fantastic young guy last night called George.
But there's free shit kicker versions of that, like Reddit and Quora, which are kind of answer marketplaces that you can access essentially for free, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Now, listen, I would say when it comes to market research, you don't have to do this all the time. If you had to sign up for a tool that was 12 quid a month and then cancel it the following month, you're probably going to get a higher quality answer from some of the paid tools.
It'll be a good investment.
Okay, so we've covered some of the tooling that's available, and in the show notes, I'll list a bunch of tools that people can link through to from there. And then the second part, and maybe the most important part, and the part that most entrepreneurs actually don't want to do, is direct approach. Okay, so actually going directly to prospects of your product and asking them questions, talking to them.
Yeah.
And the most important part of this process for new entrepreneurs is try not to bring bias to this process, right? Because at this point, you're actually, you're in peak excitement mode. You've got an idea, you've validated it, your mates and your grannies told you it's great, and you've got a positive mindset and you're flying forward with the whole thing. At this point, you're probably desperate for to validate that everything you've come up with to this point is right.
Yeah.
So, you're a conclusion looking for the facts that validate your conclusion.
I like that one.
Yeah.
And so you have to be in maximum truth-seeking mode, understanding that one of the likely outcomes, literally 50-50 at this point, one of the most likely outcomes at this stage is that what you find out in this process will invalidate your idea. And you have to go back and refine it.
I think 50-50 is optimistic. I think if you start with the principle that most of your ideas, and we've all had lots of ideas, are probably not workable or not nearly as attractive as we think they are.
Or don't fix enough pain to move anybody to action.
Don't implicate enough pain to move to action. And it's not like, and people who are excited and want this to work and want it to happen will make all sorts of compelling arguments about how it's a solution and it's a problem and it needs a solution. And they're right. The question will be, is there enough pain associated with it? And the benchmark for that's actually pretty high.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to get people to go into their wallet. It takes a nuclear powered effort to get Stephen to go into his wallet.
I come back to my favorite story. Mr. Why is your dog whimpering? Because he's sitting on a nail. Why won't he get off it? Because it's not sore enough yet.
Yeah.
That's life.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've got to be in maximum truth-seeking mode at this point and try and take all the emotion out of it. Just let the information be the information. Follow the data, follow the info to a conclusion. So you'd want to set up interviews with potential prospects. You'd want to prepare 5 to 7 open-ended questions ahead of time. So for people who've never done the open-ended question thing, that's questions that start with a who, what, why, when, or how, and can't be answered with straight yes or a no.
Yeah.
Kind of forces the person you're talking to actually talk.
And can I say
And
that?
so we would.
I'm just going to cut into that
Yeah.
and say, I think interviews can be really simple. I mean, again, we've all been there. Stand on a street corner. If you're not sure, stand at a street corner with flyers and ask people. It doesn't, and the further they are from you and the more random they are, the better the outcome.
And then when you've asked the question, shut the fuck up and listen.
Yeah. So things like, what's the most frustrating part about insert problem here?
Yeah.
Or walk me through how you currently handle insert relevant information here.
Yeah.
And so AI is throwing out a sample of what this could sound like, right? So it would be related to a meal prep business. So meal prep and meal planning. So interview clip. The most annoying thing about meal planning is that I spend all this time making up a shopping list and prepping on Sunday, but by Wednesday, I'm sick of eating the same thing and end up ordering takeaway anyway. Feels like a waste of time. That clip is for an actual customer interview from a potential meal planning, meal prep business. So they're the type of conversations you want to be having with prospects. So once you've done that, it kind of takes you on to the next part, which is defining your target customer.
So Paddy, see, just before we got on to that, can we just, as we wrap up the whole, the basics of market research, I just wanted to grill Stephen, way back when, Stephen, when you were a new lawyer, you'd obviously worked in a law firm for a while before you broke out on your own. Was there a kind of predefined path, or did you do any of those basics of the market research before you started your own law firm?
It was a different market. It was a different way of doing it. So basically, I started in law really before the internet existed. There wasn't that. So I actually went to market through a different strategy. I found gatekeepers. So basically, I found choke points where multiple people would be using that choke point. So let's take conveyancing, a mortgage broker or an estate agent, and I would find a solution for them that was their pain point. So it could be great service, it could be fees, it could be actually at the very beginning, it would be helping to arrange mortgages, because you'll never believe this, that I existed in a day where you could only borrow money based on deposits going into the bank.
Wow.
So working for a solicitor's firm, you could put money with a bank and ask them to give you some mortgage in the back of that, which you could then go to the estate agent and say, I can get 2 or 3 mortgages for your clients buying houses. Could you give me 5 or 6 new clients, please?
Wow.
So what the principle is the same. You can find a choke point, a gatekeeper. The internet is full of it, but there are still humans that are sources of many clients, and then find out what their problem is. The same questions, find out what their problems is, find out what solutions they need. And it's seldomly to do with giving them money. It's about solving a problem for them.
Yep, you're totally right. And that leads us nicely into defining your target customer, Paddy.
So defining the target customer, and it does not matter what industry you're in, right? 1,000 years ago, Andy and I used to sell paper and paper clips and pencils. And so you would
door
think,
in industrial estates, getting abused and sworn at 100 times a day.
100% door-to-door sales, guys. And so you would think, well, everybody needs pencils, so surely your customer base is everybody on earth. The answer is no, it wasn't. Everybody needs paper. Surely it's every company in the world. No, it wasn't. So it turned out you had to actually narrow it down to and literally create a person. Okay, so this is a subject called persona development. You're actually going to think, you're going to create in your mind's eye this person. You're going to write down all the characteristics.
Your customer avatar.
The customer avatar. It's persona avatar. It's got a whole bunch of different fancy names, but it's just literally visualize who's the ideal customer profile for your business.
And this is completely counterintuitive, Paddy, because as you covered off last week in the show, a lot of people go with this TAM, SAM, SOM analysis, right? Total addressable market, sellable addressable market. But that's not really the way to do it if you're trying to do it right.
It is the way to do it if you're a £50 million business trying to work out how to get to 80 million quid in the next 24 months.
But if you're trying to get from 0 to 1...
At that point, you do need to understand what the TAM, SAM, SOM. But if you're a budding entrepreneur with no employees, then you don't have to work. There's plenty of TAM, SAM, SOM out there for you.
Yeah.
Okay, TAM, SAM, SOM comes into it down the line. Now, by the way, I'm not shitting on the principles of TAM, SAM, SOM. They're sound, solid principles. And once the business scales and it's professionalized and you're trying to grow it, they'll be very important to understand that. But we're talking about people who are just trying to start a business.
0 to 1.
And at this point, they're not actually super relevant.
So let me give you my story from, again, the good old days, which I hope covers the point. My first job selling door to door was as a student in America selling pots and pans door to door.
Wow.
And the market that they addressed, and I'm going back to, again, this was the late 70s, early 80s, and the market that they realized was their target market was young ladies between the ages of 18 to 21 that hadn't gone to university, college, and that were working and were single. And they reckoned that these were the women most likely at that time to buy pots and pans and plates and cutlery to put away for their future wedding. So my job as a 20-year-old student in America in the summer of whatever was to go down to the beach and chat to people of that age to identify those clients, then go home, get out the yellow pages or the phone book, work out their addresses, and go and chat their door. And that's another story for another day. Wow. But ultimately, and then again, you find the piece of magic. And I think that's it. It's the research gives you the piece of magic. You find someone that's got the yearbook for that school.
Yeah.
And then they go through the yearbook and they can literally take, oh yeah, she's single, she went to college, she moved away. But ultimately it was addressing the perfect client for that business.
And that particular product.
Was that person. Yeah. But they really lasered it down. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut across the body.
No, it's a great example, and it actually validates the next thing I'm about to say, which is you would actually, when you're thinking about your ideal customer profile or your avatar, you would give them a name. You would give them an age range, an occupation, an income level. You would apply all these things to your customer avatar.
You would identify all the aspirations that they've got, all the fears that they've got round about that product or service. Yeah,
that gets into a subject called psychographics. Like you would go even further and say, right, what other brands are they interested in? How do they think? What fears have they got? What anxieties do they have? So you really want to create somebody in your mind's eye who you think is the perfect customer for this. So if you took, and I don't have anything prepared, so let's just come up with a fictional example here. If you took patio power washing, okay, or driveway sealing or something like that, somebody naively in that business could think, well, everybody with a driveway is a potential customer. But of course, that's not true at all. So the ideal customer persona could sound something like this. So the ideal customer persona could be somebody who is a 35 to 50-year-old professional who lives in a certain affluent postcode area, because then we can discern that they've got disposable income. Who earns X a year in these professions, who's also interested in, expensive garden furniture and, takes great care of their sheds and
home improvements and all that.
Home improvements, who's a big fan of the brand B&Q or, Home Depot, and on it goes. And by the way, Facebook, and Andy, you're the Facebook king of the all-in or the the Roundtable Rethink podcast. So not today.
Yes.
So you're the king of the Roundtable Rethink podcast when it comes to Facebook marketing. You know that Facebook does this profiling, able to identify these personas better than anybody.
100%. The demographic information.
You're actually in an interesting business that's got an extremely obvious persona.
Yeah.
Right? You can't sell to anybody who's not getting married because you sell wedding bands.
25 to 34-year-old female decision makers, engaged to be married, a lot of them young parents or busy professionals. Yeah, I mean, we've got our entire persona mapped out for our ideal customer.
So here was a example persona for a company who creates a simple invoicing app for freelancers. So their customer persona was Alex is a 34-year-old graphic designer who's been freelancing for 3 years. He makes about 50K annually, but struggles with inconsistent income. He's tech savvy, but hates bookkeeping and often leaves invoicing until the last minute. His biggest stress is chasing late payments, which sometimes leave him short on rent. Alex wants to grow his business, but feels too caught up in the admin tasks to focus on finding new clients. That's what a customer persona should sound like if it's done right.
Yeah.
Okay. So big takeaway there is everybody is not your customer, regardless of the product or service that you're selling.
Yeah.
And actually, the more
anything
people,
else?
No, I was going to say just the more people that you can exclude, the better, because you can be more targeted. And the more negative, one of the things I always like to say when I'm doing a bit of work with, again, young lawyers is, the more negative feedback you can get, the better. You don't want people to say nice things about your product, your idea. You want them to tell you all of the crappy things, because that's the only way you hone, change, and make it as likely to succeed as possible.
Because you can take all that constructive feedback and go and build it back into the service offering or the feature set of your product.
100%. And by the way, that breaks entrepreneurs' hearts. And it broke mine 1,000 times until I came to the realization that it was actually a superpower.
Yeah.
I used to, when at the start of my career, when my ego was much bigger than it is today, because it's been destroyed through 20 years of business. But at the very beginning, when somebody would come and say something bad about the product or the team or the service, it was like a knife through the heart.
Yeah.
It really was like a knife through the heart. But as I matured and I grew and I got more experience, the Araboys stuff, we used to call it Araboys. If you got a tap in the back, Paddy, Alex on the team is great. Thanks, that's wonderful to hear. I'll make sure we pass that along to Alex. But we called that an Araboy. It was motivational, but it wasn't useful in terms of improving the business, the product, the service. The real stuff that actually moved the business forward came out of horrible, difficult, awkward conversations.
Yeah.
So you should almost proactively seek them out.
Yeah. It's one of my favourite quotes. What's the difference between a wise man and a fool?
Yeah.
A wise man knows he doesn't know it all.
Yeah. And so just to wrap up that defining your target customer again, I'll just make it real again by sharing one of our own anecdotes, which is the entire world needs live entertainment. But what we had discovered from bowling clubs and somebody booking a pianist in a hotel on a Wednesday night, but we deliberately decided to go after the high leverage, high value side of the market, which was private weddings and events and corporate events, because what we'd figured out very quickly speaking to people is it was as much work booking a pianist for £100 in a piano bar on a Wednesday night as it was booking a £3,000 band for a corporate event on a Saturday night. And so, we took all that feedback, we spoke to customers, and through that we identified the type of market and the type of people that we wanted to go after. And then through all of that feedback for them, we had to go and make sure that we had packaged and presented the products in a way that made them desirable to that market.
Yeah. Okay, and then the final part of this is analysing your competition. So, of course, there's a whole bunch of online tools, and go to their websites, go to their social media. All that stuff is obvious and probably doesn't need to be said. I think the best way to analyse your competition is to go and sign up for their products and services.
Mystery shops.
True that.
It's the easiest way to understand your competitors. Spend money with them.
Yeah.
Send them your hard-earned money. Be in receipt of their products and services, and take great notes on what are they doing awesome, what sucks, because within that, I always think sometimes people think they have to come up with some brand new product or service that never existed before to start a company. And the truth is, there's so many things that have been done fucking terribly. Just go and try and engage any of the trades right now, plumbers, joiners, electrician.
Yeah.
See how horrific the communication is. The no-shows, the no-returned emails, the no-returned voicemails, they don't show up when. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Again, I think it's
almost in a way that nothing else is as horrible. And go ahead, Stephen. I think we're just a wee bit of delay between us there.
All I was going to say was, again, it goes back to that kind of idea thing. People think they have to have this world-breaking idea that's going to make them a fortune. They often forget they only have to be better than the competition.
Yeah.
One of my favourite stories, sorry, I'm being very story-centric tonight, but a company called Shoe, a Scottish company, they were the new people in the marketplace. The incumbents were Clark's shoes. Everyone would have bought Clark's shoes. I remember getting them from school. Clark's Wayfinders with the compass in the heel was the big one. Anyway, that was on every high street. And Shoe came along, and all they did was open a store right next to Clark's.
To every Clark's.
And you'd have said, well, that was lunacy. They're the incumbents. But no, they were just better, little more fashionable, better pricing point, little better with their customers.
And fishing where the fishes were, which were the people getting into Clark's.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, just be better. So once you've shopped with your competitors, you just have to be better, markedly better.
And as Paddy, just relating it back to the trades here, my son's a joiner, just about to do his trades test and pass out as a fully qualified joiner. He should absolutely put a few, mystery inquiries into some local joiners and just see the absolutely diabolical responses that come back, if you can get a response.
Another thing, and I see this a lot with younger people today, and again, it's not criticism, it's just the world in which we live. They are fabulous in social media, they're fabulous in tech. They are uncomfortable often with picking up the phone, speaking to people, having conversations. And it is a little bit of just building that thicker skin and realizing that nothing bad's going to happen, but that listening, speaking, getting feedback, you can't do it all, or certainly in a lot of businesses, you can't do it all remotely. Learn how to speak over the phone, go into shopping, interact with people.
100%. That's a subject 100%. For another day. You could wax lyrical for that on an hour, Christ.
And then as we get to the end of this, there's only a couple of extra things here and then I'll stop. So there's, don't forget, there's like Trustpilot and review. So you can actually go and read hundreds or thousands of reviews about your competitors. And from that, again, back to Manus and AI tools, just point the AI tool at your competitor's Trustpilot page and have it bring back, all
the customer
themes that have developed in the reviews. What are the negative themes? What are the positive themes? What do these guys suck at? What are they awesome at? Use that to feed it back into your product or your service. Yep. And so that's a no-brainer. And don't forget, you've got direct competition and indirect competition. So again, if we go back to the meal prep example, so let's say, right, you're planning to start a new meal prep business. Well, you've got direct competitors like HelloFresh or, Uber Eats, but then you've got indirect competitors like supermarkets and, people just buying groceries. And so it's trying to think about competition as direct competitors and also who are the indirect competitors as well. And so to sort of bring all this home and put a bow on it, I would say that this is a much... sorry, Andy, go ahead. There's definitely a bit of a delay developing between us there.
No, I was just going to say, by going through that process, you create clarity, and clarity drives everything. You'll have better product market fit. Your marketing will become more sticky and magnetic, and you'll save and make more money.
Yeah. And by the way, give yourself a time budget for this. Don't be endlessly analyzing. This is another classic trait of new entrepreneurs. If you spend enough time analyzing and thinking about something, you will eventually talk yourself out of it as well. So I would recommend, and as I was putting this framework together, give yourself a 7-day budget to go through this process. And I've even broke it down into what that could look like. So day 1 and 2, conduct online research using the tools that we've just discussed. Document your findings. Day 3 and 4, schedule and conduct at least 5 customer interviews. Record them if you can, and then listen to them back, because you will definitely hear new things when you play it back to yourself.
100%.
It's also great to have the transcripts to throw back into AI and get AI's insights. Day 5, create your detailed customer persona based on the interviews and the research that you've done. Day 6, complete your competitor analysis for at least 3 direct competitors. And then day 7, review everything you've gathered and then ask yourself honestly, based on everything I've managed to find out in the last 7 days, does this idea still make sense?
Should I proceed
and be
from here?
honest with yourself.
Or do I?
And it's not a yes, no, because what we have then is iteration.
Yeah.
That's not the problem that we thought there was. Actually, the problem is over to the left.
Let's go and modify and iterate and get to a better solution. Okay, understanding your market in the can. Module 2 of 10 of our 10-week breakdown of the entrepreneurial process of starting a business. Goddamn, Stevie. But bring it home with a freewheeling chat. I think you wanted to talk about values. You want to talk about Tesla. What else is going on in that spherical, gorgeous head of yours?
I thought there was a couple of things that just went through my head as I was traveling last week, sitting down with some really nice people. I was away with 67 American students traveling around, as I say, Ireland. I sat down one night with a lovely lady, just got to chat, and subject religion came up, and it comes up quite a lot with Americans. And as you guys know, I am not religious, but I have no issue with religion.
Yeah.
But the thing that came across to me was they were such a lovely group. Religion wasn't a big thing, but it was definitely there at some levels. And it was that whole thing about when we throw away religion, most Western societies just now struggle with religion. It's on the decline. In most places, there are exceptions. Are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? Are we losing the moral framework? Are we losing the ability to pass on nice, good, decent messages?
You mean, what do you replace my first 16 years of Catholic guilt with?
Absolutely. And it's exactly that. We're putting a religion to one side, and we're not replacing it with anything. We're not replacing it with community. Community's largely dying. And again, lovely to see these schools, which seem to be strong communities, supportive of each other. And it was another conversation with another school that I worked with a couple of years ago tonight. Some poor chap, Scott, if you're listening, love you, brother. And I hope you and Brittany are good. They lost their house in a fire. And
terrible.
It's fabulous to see how their community is just pulling behind them as a community. But without community, which I suspect we probably all feel doesn't really exist for us in a way, out with a close family group, and without religion, where are the values coming from? And that was kind of just a riff I was going to.
And the short answer is, in 5 years' time, you'll be on your hands and knees praying to an NVIDIA H200 hopper with a Global GPT loaded on it. So that will be your new digital god.
Possibly.
I've seen, I think you and I have spoken about it before, Stephen, but there's still places where this is alive and well, but they're becoming less and less. And what I find is, so my wife is Irish, and when we go back home to the little village that she lives in she lived in Tipperary or grew up in, called Thurles, there are still some wonderful old-fashioned community values that exist that are just lovely to see and interact with. So I'll give you some examples, right? So if anybody in that community is struggling, your letterbox will just light up with handwritten cards, people telling you, thinking about you, offering you help, people showing up with food like that. It is wonderful and beautiful thing to actually observe. if there's a real reverence for death in Ireland. I know that's kind of sounds weird when you're talking about community, but if somebody dies, they're buried very, very quickly. So from dying to being in the ground could be 2 or 3 days, compared to Scotland where it's about 4 weeks. But it's actually tremendous to see how the whole community would rally around you when that happens. And that's not to say that when people die here, their families don't rally around about them. I mean, like in Ireland, if you bumped into that person in a supermarket 15 years ago, it's incumbent on them to show up to your funeral.
Yeah. But these are things that you pass on from parents to children, isn't it? And that's the thing, if you do have relatively kind of traditional family values, it's something that you try and instill in your children, and then they're the custodians to pass it on to theirs. But as society kind of...
But we all have tried our best to bring up our kids. Was it the lyric? I believe my parents did the best job they knew to do. But we know that our parents were not perfect, and we are not perfect parents. So you're really dependent on schools, places. Don't know about you guys, but anytime I speak to teachers, I only hear negative stuff.
Satanic.
UK terms, no culture, no values. Really hard to be able to do what they feel is best for the children in the current world that we live in.
Yeah.
So, and hard to enforce any discipline because, largely mobile phones, cell phones in the classroom. I just don't see how any of that gets fixed until you take the cell phones out of the classroom.
So religion would have been a traditional place where you would go, and we would all probably agree religion for any of us was quite harsh, could be quite tough at times, forced to go to things you didn't want to do. But ultimately you look back and go, pretty good values. We're all kind of happy with the human beings that hopefully we've become. And just that question, I do wonder, what will take us forward, and certainly in the UK, reinforce the values that we kind of know we need to have for great entrepreneurs, even bring it back to that, hard work, good ethics, etc.
And I have seen that in these kind of, obviously when we were over in Ireland, we met Emma's family, they're off of the country, and you can just see that kind of solid, kind of wholesome kind of values in them. Meanwhile, outside of Thurles, Bonnie Blue, the porn star, is about to try and double her record by doing a 2,000 person gangbang in 24 hours. So
grotesque.
Yeah, family values are alive and
grotesque.
well.
Yeah, and that's
stuff like that just sickens you.
Yeah. And I have to say again, just so that was just a general riff. Always interested to hear where that's coming from. I think the world is changing. It is AI, tech, etc. Fabulous. It's bringing with it lots of problems. I read an article recently. Is AI and tech, social media, simply going to be the cigarettes and alcohol of the 1940s?
Yeah,
and
very
we're
possibly.
going to have to find a way within the next 10 years to deal with how it's affecting our kids. There's going to be more and more links found between that and issues that we've got.
There you have it, guys. The philosopher king, Stevie Tel Aviv.
Might be a seam that's worth mining in future episodes, like actually breaking that problem down and like AI, tech, impacts on society, but not like the economic stuff, which we focus on a lot, but the other stuff, like how's it affecting values, the family, all the big picture, all the big questions that are hard to just answer with,
Stephen, we're a minute two in. We've got about 5 minutes left. Just touch on what's happening with Tesla at the moment.
I don't know. It's bouncing. I think
talk about religion.
Absolutely. Well, again, so what we're seeing. So we talked a couple of weeks back now about, is the Tesla model broken? Are we seeing a flight away? Is it lack of new products? We've all spoken about the Chinese cars and the impact they're having and going to continue to have, and yet Tesla seems to be bouncing. I mean, I think when I last checked, it was up 10%.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to say I'm going to reserve my position on Tesla.
You're not selling just yet.
Not selling just yet. My 2 shares, but I do still think that Rachel Reeves, if anyone saw her on Kroonberg's at the weekend speaking about her position in British politics, my prediction should be gone before Christmas. It's still
it was atrocious. It was just one of the worst interviews. I mean, she absolutely sucks on every level.
Considering like things are flatlining so badly, she's so fucking indefatigable, right? She just like seldom right, but never in doubt.
Again,
100%.
yeah, and we have some fundamental problems, and I think we've all watched a quite an interesting debate about what do we need? Do we need reduction in tax? Do we need a better distribution of wealth? There's some major problems facing our economy, as is with many. Too much money in too few hands. But how do you make people, the average man, wealthier? And it's not about taxing the rich more. It's about making people more productive and creating wealth. And I, for one, do not think they're getting it right.
Well, here's what I'll say about that, and I'll leave this for viewers to go and do yourself, because it is a big topic to try and unpack. I watched a fabulous debate on that exact subject last week on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, Diary of a CEO.
Yeah.
And that pugnacious little fucking gobshite Gary Economics was on it, who is a very, very smart guy. And he was a fabulously successful trader. He's got kind of rough, kind of South London kind of accent. And he's facing off against this Australian dude whose name escapes me at the moment, but I was blown away by the quality of the debate. Gary Economics was doing that. We need to tax the rich more. And then the other guy was making the case for free market capitalism. And it was absolutely riveting. So I would commend that to our listeners and tell them, instead of listening to a very poor interpretation by us, get your ass over to YouTube and check that debate out on Diary of a CEO.
And I think it touches on something we've talked about in the podcast before, which is we are going through another industrial revolution. It's a tech revolution.
100%.
And what has happened with all previous revolutions has been more wealth to the wealthy, less wealth to the poor.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see whether or not government, because that's ultimately what's going to direct us, is going to put in place a better model to distribute, and no signs of that happening anytime soon.
Unfortunately, there isn't. Uncle
By the way,
Paddy,
as we're finishing on a super random speed run here, just back on Tesla, if only somebody could have predicted that Tesla was in terminal decline and would have bounced back in the last couple of weeks. If only somebody could have predicted that, Stephen. So anyway, listen, a related story to Tesla, and then I'll need to go. Quick one. Did anybody see this week 2 announcements from BYD? Who again, if you're a Western car company, this is the most dangerous competitor you have in the whole world. 2 facts about BYD. Number one, they've came out with a new battery and a new charging infrastructure that does 1,000 kilowatts an hour.
5 minutes for a full charge.
5 minutes from empty to full.
80 kilowatts a minute.
Yeah, so just crazy new breakthroughs in charging speeds, not necessarily capacity or energy density, but the thing that actually matters, which is charging speed. Compared to a Tesla, by the way, which is like maxes out right now at 250 kilowatts.
Which you never get. I drove up from the Lake District at the weekend and pulled into a 150 kilowatt charger, went into Costa, checked the app, and it was charging at 45 fucking kilowatts. I was in Costa in Southwaite Services for 1 hour trying to get home. So bring on the 5 minute charger.
And then the other thing I saw about BYD this week is they're building a new facility to expand their business. And it's so big. It's the size of San Francisco.
Their factory.
Their new factory compound, and the reason it's so big, by the way, is all the employees live on campus, on site. Tens of thousands of employees. And the entire footprint of this new factory and all the surrounding campus to support it will be the size of San Francisco.
Let's go. It's go big or go home. And on that note, it's time for us to go home. Episode number 11 of the Roundtable Rethink podcast. In the can. Good to have you back, Uncle Stevie. Before we finish up, initiate crazed begging mode.
If you haven't already done so, please like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. We'd love to hear about things you want to talk about more, anything else that you think we could be doing better. Give us the feedback we've been telling you about tonight. So any comments you've got, We'd love to hear
Yeah,
that.
follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Uncle Paddy, safe journey back up the road tomorrow, bro. And I shall catch you for a breakfast on Wednesday morning.
Bye-bye.
That's it, folks. See you next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.